team. All right, AT, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you got to meet some new folks or some old friends and connect in the breakout rooms. But we're super excited today to have Dr. Mitesh Ra, CEO and founder of OMNY Health, to share his story. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, AT. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so we'll probably cover three areas today. First, we'll start with just a little bit of his background as a physician and hospital exec, before he gets into the startup journey. And then we'll go deep into OMNY Health and all the lessons learned from beginning to where they're at today over the past, 5-6 years or so. And then we'll wrap with just some future thoughts, as we're talking in the breakout room some, but just some future thoughts on healthcare and where it's going. So as JC mentioned, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end, and I'll remind you again later. But don't be afraid to post questions in the chat. We'll touch on those. So with that, just to get us going, maybe start a little bit of what made you want to be a physician and even get into the healthcare space in the beginning?
Yeah, sure. So first generation of my family, born in this country. I grew up in the Chicagoland area. So hence my love for Chicago, my Chicago mug, even though I certainly can't deal with a cold anymore. My background's interesting. I'm a product of both engineering and healthcare. My mom's an OBGYN and my dad is a software engineer. And as a kid, both of them wanted me to follow in their pathway. So my dad would teach me early programming. He'd make me work on some of our early computers that we owned when I was a kid. Would come home like after homework. And my mom wanted me to be a surgeon. So she'd cut up chickens at she'd buy like a whole chicken. She'd cut it up at the dining table and she'd make me stitch it together because her dream was that I was going to be a surgean. So it was an interesting childhood to say the least.
That's an interesting picture in my head right there. Practicing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was wild. And, at the end, I ended up going to med school. And so my mom, checked that box and she used to tell my dad all the time that she won. Now it's a little bit debatable. Now at the dinner table, my dad's like, actually, I grew up in a healthcare focused family and I ended up going to med school at a very early age. So did a 6-year med program where I applied to med school out of high school, got in and did 2 years of undergrad, then went to Jefferson, fell in love with healthcare as a whole. I started my journey going down that pathway of being a surgeon, which was my sort of my dream. And then partway through that, I ran into the emerging world of technology that was coming into the clinical environment. And I kept seeing all of this technology come through, and it was incredibly disruptive. We just didn't have ways to really incorporate it within how we were practicing medicine in a very facile way. Other industries want to disrupt. We don't really want to disrupt in healthcare. We want to facilitate. So ended up figuring out that I needed to, this is an area that I was really interested in. Ended up going and applying to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and ended up going to Yale, got my master's there, finished my residency at Yale in emergency medicine, and then started down the pathway of both health services research, but also ended up becoming a physician executive on the health system side. So at Northwestern, I started helping to lead the innovation work there, and then got recruited to Stanford, where I was the chief patient safety officer, built out our center for implementing new technology and clinical safety and quality, started to lead a big chunk of quality at the health system level, and was very happy being a physician executive at a big health system. But in the back of my head, I was constantly annoyed because I'd have all of these opportunities for external data partnerships coming at me. I'd have pharma companies, med device companies, AI and analytics companies who wanted to partner on data. And I couldn't find a secure, compliant way for us to build those data relationships at scale. We kept doing them as one-ofs, and it was like reinventing the wheel each time. It was a huge compliance burden. And at the end of the day, I looked at this massive industry on the R&D side and all of this work that was happening around democratizing clinical trial access, health equity and research, and the very large market of opportunity that existed. But I couldn't find a way for us to do it at scale. And so eventually I got frustrated enough that in 2018, myself, my co-founder, raised venture capital to start OMNY. And we've been on this journey now. Next year will be, I guess, 6 years. But we've built this into a growth stage company that now covers all 50 states and have partnerships extending with some of the largest IDNs, nonprofits, academic medical centers, NCIs, children's hospitals all over the country. And our platform today encompasses 75 million lives. And so it's one of the strongest data layers now on a national level, helping to connect that world of clinical care into the larger world of research and development, powering everything from health economics outcomes research to safety and efficacy research, right? How do we build safer medications, safer medical devices? How do we improve inclusion in clinical trials? How do we drive health economics outcomes research to really look at things like social determinants of health and health equity concerns? So driving all of that on a national level. And it's been an amazing journey to put that piece together.
Very cool. Well, love that background, and we'll dive into some of the the points there. But maybe let's start with that transition from, hey, doctor, hospital exec. I'm sure you were doing well, but like, what got you over that hump to say, a lot of people think about starting a business, but a lot of people actually don't go do it. What got you over the hump to say, I feel so convicted about this, I want to go start this?
Yeah, so it's a few things, right? One, it's very hard to take that level of comfort, the salary, the steady work, the role itself, and then just kind of throw it all out the window. I was lucky to have a few things. One, I've got a pretty decent risk appetite. And so I was frustrated enough that I said, well, if I don't build this, I don't know that anyone's going to build it the way I think it should be built and is going to do it right. So if I want it done right, I'm going to do it myself. I should take this risk. Two, I have a very supportive wife who didn't bat an eye when I told her I wanted to do this. And she said, look, I make a good salary. We'll figure it out. It may be a little bit rough for the first few years when you're not taking a dollar at all. And, I went from having a great salary coming out of Stanford to making $0 in the first few years. And, that's the job of a founder. But, the belt was a little bit tight, but it's fine. We managed through it. And at the end of the day, I think the risk piece, you have that conviction that you can do something, that you're on the right path, that you can build something, and you have to take that plunge. And the truth is if this was easy, anyone would do it. A lot of people don't, because they'll come across a great idea and then not want to risk it because there's a fear of failure. Truth is that most startups fail, right? A large percentage of them, as they get to each stage, fall over. Not many get to growth stage, not many get to an exit. But I will say that my only regret in all of this is that I just didn't do it sooner. It's not easy. There's ups and downs. It's a constant roller coaster ride. I mean, in our early years, there were days where in the morning we thought we were gonna, we're like, oh my God, we're gonna be amazing, we're gonna IPO, and then by the evening we're like, oh my God, we're gonna die next month. And it's a constant emotional roller coaster. And I had no gray hairs when I started this company, and as you can see, I have plenty. But you build resilience, and the best entrepreneurs have that resilience to keep going when the going gets tough. They don't quit. And that's one of the reasons I often push a lot of other physicians to become entrepreneurs, because it's part of our training and part of how we're selected in there is that we don't give up. When going gets tough, when things are tough, when our patients are facing death's door, we don't just throw the towel in. We keep fighting. And that level of conviction piece, I think, really lends itself to entrepreneurship. So I always encourage people to take the plunge. I know it's not for everyone, and it's certainly not an easy path. But I think now that I've done this, I don't think I could do anything else.
I love that perfect combination of that, conviction and passion for the space with the resilience to work through all the ups and downs. Cause, we see that all the time starting our own businesses, and part of it, like in any given day, there's so many, we're about to take off and then, oh wait, we're not going to make it to tomorrow. Right.
And the number of, look, this year has been a wake up call for a lot of companies. I mean, there are unicorns that are shutting their doors because they've raised at such high valuations, they've raised so much capital, and they can't sort of live up to that hype bubble now in an economic downturn. So it's not over till it's over, right? And any company that sits on its own laurels until it's reached an exit, you don't know, until you can actually get this company to a position where you successfully exit the business, that everything is still up in the air, regardless of how big you get. And so that part of the journey never changes. And every day I deal with that as a founder. And I'm lucky to have an incredible leadership team of seasoned veterans who also are, they're incredibly resilient. They don't get flustered when things get rough. And we as a team work our way through every challenge.
Let's talk about that a little bit from all right, hey, you made the commitment. Hey, I am going to take the plunge. to how did you get those early founders together with you? And then what were your first steps to start vetting? Hey, I've got this great idea and I've seen this in practice, but like, how do I start testing? Is there something here or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm not, even though I have some minor, very, very minor capabilities, or at least I used to on the technology side, I'm not a technologist. I know healthcare data well enough to be dangerous, which was helpful to be called the subject matter expert on that side, especially in our early years when I was the only clinician in the room. But I needed a technical co-founder, and I was lucky enough to have a friend who I've known since the 90s, proud Georgia Tech grad. And one of the reasons the reason we're here in Atlanta, who I reached out to, and he saw exactly what we were doing. And, Sean O'Brien, who's my co-founder and our CTO, and has done an incredible job building the engineering core, helping build the culture of the business, helping get us, to where we are today. And that piece of finding the founders around you who have the skill sets that you don't have, or the capabilities you don't have, that's a really important part. And as a founder, that founding team, your job is to kind of do everything out of the gates, and do it well enough to get to a certain stage until you can find somebody who knows it better, who can do it better than you, empower them and get out of their way, right? And that's always the key to really building a strong team, is to find those people. And so we were lucky enough to come along. We found an incredible operator who's our SVP of operations, and she runs an incredibly tight ship across our business. We found an incredible chief strategy officer who helped guide every step of our early development and has now built an incredible function, both from product and the commercial side. So we've got an incredible leadership team that has really driven this company to where it goes today. And, I can't take credit. Like, I can take some credit early on, but the truth is that it is a team effort. And they say it takes a village to build something. It really does, right? Like it's like you're raising a child. So putting that together requires the right people around you, and investing in them.
So as you started getting that team around you, how did you think through the process of talking to potential customers, getting customers to pay for something, building something? How did you balance selling versus building as you got going?
Yeah, that's an interesting piece. And we early on, when we started the company, we were focused in on one aspect of data, which is really just the supply chain data and the pharmaceutical data. We were thinking about things like drug shortages, and we were built on a DLT-based, blockchain approach to tracking the data with immutable evidence. It was a sort of really in our first year that we realized that there was a broader world of healthcare data that we could help align, and there was more good that we could do, a much bigger picture we could chase after. And that piece, that was a bit of a kind of realization. And that's the truth is, for most startups, you have an idea of what you're going to do, and there are, column pivots and expansions as you go along. You have to be flexible. You have to understand where your product fits and how it aligns. And I will say that I had the advantage of having been a health system executive, so I could walk in and talk to other health system executives and say, I've been on your side of the table. I know what your challenges are. I know what the issues are that you're dealing with. I know where your strengths are. I know where you need some support. And that definitely helped a lot. So our early, approach to partnership was me going out to my network and engaging folks and being able to actually speak as one of them. And that's, the job of any founder early on, is you're leading the commercial efforts, you're leading the partnerships. Before you hire anyone to do that work, you have to really build that playbook yourself and successfully do it to a certain level of scale that you get that product market fit. And then from there, you can hire folks to be able to take, the baton and drive it. So that piece was, it was a lot of us. It was a lot of beating the pavement and traveling everywhere and having conversations, and, the early rejections, which you don't let them phase you. You just keep moving forward. And I think we're at a scale now where we don't see very much of any. Like, we rarely get anyone who doesn't want to partner with us. But early on, it was a challenge to get people to say, hey, this is the model. Bring your data onto the platform. Let's build a national data layer. Trust us with your data. Yeah, we're, a couple of guys with a slide deck, but we've been in this industry for a long time. We have the expertise, and so that did help as well. The fact that we weren't very young, working out of our parents' garage, gave a lot of credence to what we were talking about.
Yeah, lots of interesting things there, but I just want to highlight the point you mentioned about, like, as the founder, you're driving the early commercial success. I see a lot of founders who may not have a sales background and will say, hey, I just need to go raise money to hire a head of sales and this is going to take off. And that's not the answer.
I never sold AT. I never sold a thing in my life. And when we started this business, I was convinced that I was definitely not the person to go out and sell. I looked at it with dread. I have brought on every single one of our data provider network, right? All 75 million lives have come through me going out there, having those conversations. Because what we realized was if I did it, it was different, right? And so that piece, learning to sell is an important part. And nobody can tell the story better than the people who are actually founding it. It's your baby. The story so well, you know how to communicate it. And that's a really important part. Now, hiring people to handle customer success, engagement, all the other component parts, you have to find great people. And we've been incredible on that side too. An incredible chief of staff who's helped drive and build so much of that component, an incredible delivery team that works directly with our hospital system partners. So that part is there, but I'm still on with clients. I still travel at least 3 days a week, meeting clients.
Well, I think just to all the learnings you get from having those conversations yourself of why they said this or why they didn't do this, and being able to ask questions versus having to hear it secondhand from somebody else and not really knowing, so I love that you said that. Talk me through, you mentioned a little bit of hey, early on, obviously you had the advantage of you were a hospital exec. I was in your shoes. You got a seasoned team going through. How did you balance that trade-off, which you alluded to of yeah, we're in, and then you'll go figure it out, or come back to me once you've got something and then we'll participate. How did you balance that feedback?
Yeah, it's nobody wants to be the first person in the pool. Everybody's kind of waiting for someone else to dive in. And I came from the academic medical center world, which is I remember I went to all the AMCs and they said, well, who else is from the AMCs is on there? Who else is on the platform? Nobody, we just started. So it was an interesting piece. But then once we got our first hospital system on, we leveraged that. We were incredibly customer focused. Once we got our first data partners on, we dedicated ourselves to making your customers happy, because at the end of the day, best in class product and happy customers is your recipe to success. And so we were always very product focused and still are. We're always very customer focused and still are. And that's just a core to the kind of DNA that we've built in the business. And that's a big part, right? Is putting it aligned into that vision of, look, we wake up in the morning, we're thinking about our partners, our customers, we're thinking about how we can delight them, how we can make their lives easier, how our product can grow with them, how do we get that success? Because investors want to see the early traction, but then they come back and they want to see the repeat customers. And when we got, last year was really our first commercial year. This is our second year of commercial, and we have a 100% renewal rate. We're expanding with all of our clients. We've grown into new logos, right? That level of success is great. But even when we raised our Series B, I still had some investors who came to me and said, well, it's great that you got all these pharma who are leveraging your platform, but we want to see them come back. We want to see repeat business. We want to see this. We want to see that. And you just have to believe. You don't take that feedback as a criticism. You take it as a genuine, okay, well, that's my target. I need to renew my engagements. I need to expand with my clients. I need to show that this product is sticky. And if that's what it needs to do, then great. That's my next benchmark to hit. So every challenge you get is just another target for you to overcome and win.
Yeah, well, a lot of good stuff in there. I want to dive into a little bit. One of the things that you hear a lot in the entrepreneur world is the term product market fit, and people have different definitions of what that is. But as you got that first hospital and then started to get what were your clues that hey, all right, we always had the vision, but now we're starting to get the customers to believe in it too. What did you see that made you start to think, hey, I think we're really onto something here?
Yeah, I mean, it was being really engaged with the customers, hearing that feedback, talking to the leadership of these life sciences companies, understanding that we were transforming how they were able to partner with the larger clinical world, what they were doing in the space with patients, how they were thinking about healthcare as a whole, and all focused on patient-centered research, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not a company that's our focus is on how we can advance healthcare and how we can do right by patients, how we can forward research. And so we saw that huge market, and when we went to the market, they loved it. They gave us the praise. They showed us why our product was better. They showed us what we needed our product to continue to grow towards, which was incredible, right? That customer feedback is so important. It's gold. And you take that and you run with it, especially when you start to triangulate it across multiple customers. So that was a big piece. The second part was thinking through kind of how do we constantly make the product better. Never just rest on the laurels of having a great product. It has to constantly evolve. You have to constantly be thinking about, well, what can we do now that's more? How can we make things better for our customers? How can we make things better for the larger healthcare industry? How do we continue to tell this story? And so that, almost like a forced evolution function, you just have to always have a growth mindset in this business. Even as you start to get larger and more successful, there's nothing to rest on.
So to that point on the evolution, one of the things we also hear in the startup world a lot is the term pivots, right? And moving through and evolving. Talk us through a little bit. You mentioned, hey, when you started, you focused on just one data element to get going, which I love that focus. How did you pivot and or expand the vision, the product as you kept moving forward?
Yeah, healthcare data is complicated, and there's so much nuance buried in the information. So when we started out, I think we knew maybe 10% of the data that we actually have today that we needed to be able to tell these stories, align these research opportunities, build these rare disease drugs. That component part took an evolution. And so one thing that we were lucky enough to do early on is we built these collaborative relationships with our data partners. So it wasn't like we were disintermediated. A lot of companies that work with data in healthcare will have like an aggregation model, or they'll work with other partners who obtain the data. We built the direct relationships. And the reason we did that is we always wanted our network to be able to stand on its own. So no one disintermediates us. There's no one upstream of us. Our relationships are directly with the providers, with the patients, with the health systems. And that allows us to have a dynamic, timely, deep, ever-growing data layer that really can evolve as the needs of the industry evolve. And that's an important piece when you're thinking about it from an entrepreneur, about where to position your company in the sort of stack of other groups, technology, always having, I've always had set this standard that said, well, no one should be upstream of us, because we really want to have the direct relationship, and that way you can't get disintermediated. So we try to continue to focus on that side, and that's what allows us to keep evolving, but it also allows us to have that channel of communication where, when we publish research that helps advance rare disease care, it's hand in hand with, with our provider organizations. It's hand in hand with our life sciences customers. And we see data as a common language to really bridge those groups together, because for too long, they've been completely separated out in silos. And I think data is the great connector. It can help align everyone that together we can focus on patients.
Mm-hmm. Great. So as part of that evolution, another topic that comes up for startups is just fundraising. When do you raise? How much do you raise? Who do you raise from? Maybe talk us through how you thought about when and how to fundraise, any lessons learned with that.
So we got really lucky in the investors that we brought on. Well, luck, and also I think we were purposeful. So when I raised our initial seed round, Kevin Ryan, who, one of the most lauded entrepreneurs, sold DoubleClick to Google and started their ads business, chaired MongoDB when they went public, and an absolute incredible operator, entrepreneur on his own accord, led our seed and actually led our Series A. And that was an incredible piece. And so that part was huge for us, having kind of seasoned operators. And when I raised my seed round, I raised from a lot of successful operators who were angels, right? People who had been in the trenches, who had paid a payroll, who had dealt with HR issues, who had fundraised themselves, right? Like that's the type of person I wanted to surround myself with. And so, we purposely went out to, super angels who were operators, who knew the space, who could help be that support group, right? Because as a first-time founder, you don't know what you don't know, and you step in it often. And if you can surround yourself by people who have been through the playbook, who've been through that journey, who've been through the ups and downs, then you have that support structure right behind you. So that's something that we did early on that was really incredible. And then as we brought on board members, I focused on bringing on folks who come in from the healthcare space. I'm proud to say that my external board members are practicing physicians as well as investors, right? Like they're partners at firms, but they actually practice. They actually still see patients. They touch patients. They're involved in the clinical environment. And that changes the dynamics of my board, because my board is healthcare focused, right? So that's an interesting culture that we've built at the board level too. And that's also how we've looked at the investment world, is really thinking about folks who are deep in healthcare, who are really connected to healthcare, and can help us further the mission of what we're building.
Oh, that's great. So to that point, right, pulling in folks who get healthcare and practice in healthcare, obviously healthcare is a different industry than most to start a business. You can't just go put a website up and get, 50 customers tonight in healthcare, but there's a complex web of regulations, payers, providers, hospitals, pharma, all the different folks. How do you think about navigating all those different constituents or building your team to be able to do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stakeholders, and as you continue to evolve as a company, more stakeholders come in. So that's always going to be something that will evolve as the company grows. I think the key is really finding the right people on your team who can take on those pieces. So as you evolve and you see new parts of the industry, new parts to your business model, you need leaders to step in. And we focused always on finding experts in the industry who were happy to take on an individual contributor role out of the gates, right? Not somebody who was going to come in and just like immediately jump in and run a team and be a high level leader, but somebody who's going to roll their sleeves up and dig in and get to that stage. And that's made a huge difference for us because our leadership team does roll up its sleeves. They do get in there. They don't, rest back and try to manage. Yes, now they have teams and they run those teams very well, but they're always centered on the business. And they were in there building the approaches from day one. So that's not an easy thing to find, particularly with veterans. We brought on a lot of folks who've been in this industry 20 plus years who were willing to do that. Were willing to come in and say, okay, I will take all this on and then I will build a team out afterwards. But that's something that we selected for when we were trying to bring on our first, call it few leadership hires. And it's made a big difference to our business.
Yeah, so maybe it's a couple more questions here to wrap up. And then folks, as you have questions for Dr. Mitesh, put them in the chat, please, and we'll call them out here in a minute. But that journey from the idea to getting some early customers to starting to grow and scale, obviously very different stages, different things. Any major lessons learned that you could share with entrepreneurs of as the company changes stages? Here are some things that I learned that I wish I had known back when I was going through those transitions.
Yeah. Well, a few things, right? So one, don't be afraid to take risks in the business, but be fast to recognize when that risk isn't panning out. And that's an important part, right? They use that phrase like fail fast. And the truth is that, you have to continue to evolve as a business and you have to keep trying new things, and they don't always work out. But when they do succeed, they become an incredible part of your business going forward. So you have to constantly have that risk appetite. You have to be willing to try to build new things. You have to keep, an eye on the industry and see where your company needs to grow. And not everything that we've tried has worked, but a lot has. And, we constantly are bringing new things to our customers. We're constantly engaging them to understand where their needs are evolving. Because if we keep it customer centric, we're always building in the right direction. So that's one part that I'd say, I'd say that, as advice to a new founder. The second piece is to just make sure that you have the right group around you. Being able to have the right leaders who can help you run that business, have the right investors who can provide the right support, not just from a financial perspective, but also from an operating perspective is huge. And at the end of the day, you have to run the business yourself. It succeeds on your own efforts. But being able to tap into perspective and understand how to navigate things, I can call up some of our investors and be like, hey, I'm running into this issue. How did you deal with it? Across the 3 companies you exited that you led. Well, here's how I dealt with it. Right? That advice is invaluable. And I've made the effort to also connect with other founders and to build a network of other founders that I can rely on. And that way, you have that support structure, because being a founder is a lonely journey, and it's tough because you can't often be vulnerable even with your leadership team fully. And so, if you've got co-founders, that's amazing because your co-founders are there with you and you guys can be vulnerable with each other. But having other founders to bounce ideas off of, to share that journey and address those issues is also an incredible piece. And networks like this, right, that you've put together are really helpful. I had something similar when I lived in the Bay. I'm trying to build that network up now here in Atlanta. And that way, not only can you have that support structure, but you can also give back.
Yeah, love that. Just being around others in community that can help you share those stories, because odds are they've gone through it before, they know somebody that does, and like, hey, I'm not alone in this this problem. So great advice there. All right, last question here, and then we'll turn over to some questions in the chat. We were talking about a little bit about this in the breakout room, but as you start to look forward in healthcare and where healthcare is going over the next 10, 20 years, what are some big trends or ideas that you see, hey, this is gonna happen in the next 10, 20 years, and what is it gonna take to figure those out?
So it's interesting. We went through this cycle where I would say in the early 2000s, people started to realize that healthcare data was incredibly powerful and really the key to everything that you were trying to drive in the space. And so there was a big push, call it in the early 2000s, 2010s, where we started to really drive into pushing, adoption of electronic health records, starting to bring data together, building those data collaborations. And then it kind of petered a bit, call for the last handful of years. Now we're in that cycle again where everyone's realizing that data is incredibly powerful. And that's, of course, thanks to the generative AI space really pushing a lot in the healthcare world. Because earlier this year, we had a bunch of companies come out wanting to build in generative AI. And then everyone realized that you need data to do it. If everybody builds on the same claims data and publicly available data, you just get the same product over and over again, and it's shallow and doesn't have the depth. So how do you get access to deep, powerful data to really be able to drive that piece? That's a core component. So there's a lot in healthcare that's evolving very quickly. Data is at the center of all of it. Whether you look at value-based care, whether you look at collaborative opportunities between providers and payers, let's say, or you look at the opportunities between providers and life sciences companies, there's a ton that's happening in that space, and it's all centered around data. And without data, we're stuck with subpar products that certainly aren't going to deliver on the vision of where healthcare could go. So we have a lot still to do in building that infrastructure. As an industry, we are constantly pushing to advance it. We are still behind many other industries when it comes to data infrastructure, but we're getting there. And each year it gets better and better. The technology gets better, the collaborative opportunities get better, the infrastructure gets better. So I see a lot of potential for where healthcare will go, but we have to constantly still focus on the data side, because without it, we don't have the ability to build those connection points between what is a very vast and disintermediated industry.
Oh, great stuff. Good thoughts there. And so I'll ask another one here, just because we alluded to it earlier, but I'll circle back here at the end. Being a physician, how important is it for a healthcare startup to have a physician or somebody who speaks the medical language on their team versus an outsider? What are some thoughts on that?
So, a biased opinion, but the world of healthcare startups is littered with the graves of companies that raised incredible capital that didn't have the right clinical insight in how to implement and scale it. So it's really important to have either somebody who's on the founding team or the right support people around that founder who understand healthcare, who understand how to implement things within that clinical world, who understand the complexities, on our side, the complexity of healthcare data. That's so vitally important in healthcare. And look, I love when I see founders outside of healthcare who want to come in and do good, because, the reason we go into healthcare as a vertical, it's not because it's the easiest vertical to build and it's one of the hardest, but because you can have such an incredible impact. That's why you often see successful founders from other verticals who, exit their first company and then their next company they want to start is in healthcare because they want to make a difference. That's fantastic, right? We need more of that, but we do need the right connectivity in there. And how you build a product, it has to be centered around the nuances that exist in the healthcare environment and the needs that exist. Otherwise, disruption for the sake of disruption just doesn't work in this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always remember the stories that we were selling at a healthcare data analytics startup and going to sell. And one of the first meetings we had, we learned that their first question was, well, when have you practiced medicine? And we didn't have a good answer to that. So we quickly got a physician on board on the team that could help speak the language in the room and help us navigate some of that.
Yeah, and my perspective was different because I was the person who was trying to bring in great innovative companies into the health systems that I was working at, right? I was the point person interviewing these companies, getting them, in, trying to scale them across the health system. My team helped to implement. So that was a huge piece of what I was doing. So I knew, the people we were coming to, like what they were facing and what they needed. And that part was important, right? Being facilitative, not being a huge burden. The resources are tight in healthcare. And so, as a company, you have to really be white glove service to really deliver that piece. But if you do it right, your customers are happy. Believe it or not, we don't have a team that acquires partners. We have nobody. It's our customers call up other customers. Our health system executives call up other health system executives. They say, hey, are you working with Omni? You should be on Omni. You should, leverage Omni. And that's how we've grown now into this national network that covers, we're on track to be 20% of the country's data solely by word of mouth. And every time I've tried to bring somebody on to lead that sales, I realize it's not sales, it's partnership. So I still take on a lot of those conversations. I've got an incredible customer success team that engages with our health system partners. But organic growth is, that speaks for itself. And we're on track to be 100 million lives next year, probably really quickly next year. So at that point, that's a game-changing level of data, far beyond where we already are today. So we take our duties as custodians of that very, very seriously.
Well, great. We'll do one question here from the chat and then wrap up. Question for you. Any recommendation for where to find the right co-founders?
Oh, great question. I was lucky enough to know my co-founder. That really helped. I would say there's two things you want. One, you want them to be the other side of the coin for what you don't have, right? So it's a balancing act. Two, there's got to be a lot of trust and connectivity. It's like you're like raising a child together, right? It's almost like a marriage. And so you've got to have somebody you can really rely on, somebody who will be with you, right, through thick and thin. I was lucky enough to know my co-founder and trust him. But if you don't have that person in your network, organizations like this, right, being out there, talking to folks, finding experts, and then building a relationship. And I think it's really important to build a relationship before you've found something, because when the going gets tough, if you don't have that relationship to rely back on, there's nothing, there's nothing connecting the two of you, or the three of you, or the four of you, or how many other founders you have. And look, God bless solo founders who do it. I don't know how they do it, because it's lonely. So having the right people around you is a really important piece.
Great. Well, Dr. Mitesh, thank you so much for sharing your great story of your background in Omni here. Lots of great lessons learned on just, building the right team and really understanding the customer and being out in front of them. So we'll publish a recap here in the coming days. But thanks everybody else for joining as well. Just to wrap up, we'll have an Atlanta Startup Convos meetup here coming up in December. And then our next healthcare meetup is going to be in January as a special surprise. I mentioned, we've been doing this 5 years now. We're going to bring back two of the founders who were super early and just did a startup roundtable presentation 5 years ago and have now gone on to do some amazing things to grow their business. So it'll be neat to see them come back 5 years later and share their journey. And then for those who need any healthcare resources, if you go to atlantaventures.com/healthcare, we record all these. You can see those. If you have a company here, we want to share it and post it on there. So feel free to check it out there. But thanks again so much, Dr. Mitesh and everybody else for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a great day.